Hi plant friends, it's an orchid update. These are the orchids that I purchased at the last two Orchid Society show and sale. I've gotten a lot of requests to do an update, so let's get into it. The leafless orchids are doing fantastic. I've noticed a few little new growths on them, which I'm quite excited about. Take a look at this little root, it's actively growing. Now this is telling me that this orchid has acclimated to my home and it hasn't suffered any setback. I've been watering these Chilochistas every day in the morning so they can dry out by night. The first batch of orchids were purchased from the Southern Ontario Orchid Society show and sale, and then we'll review the ones that I purchased from the Royal Botanical Orchid Show and Sale. Two orchids are mounted on this mount. The first one is pushed at a flower spike and the second one is working on a little leaf. Plant friends, this leaf is telling me that this orchid's really happy. They had 3 varieties at the show. I should have purchased all 3, but I was being modest and I only purchased 2. It's been 6 weeks since the Southern Ontario Orchid Show and I haven't suffered any casualties. This is what I do for the Chilochistas every morning. I put them in water and let them soak for about a minute or 2. Not too long at all, just enough to get the roots nice and green. It's fascinating to watch. It's instantaneous. These roots just soak up all that water that they need. When they're done soaking, I hang them in a glass vase. This allows them to retain a little bit of humidity. My home's very dry, so it slows down how quickly they dry out. And by nighttime, these orchids are completely dry and ready the next day for a fresh soak. There was a lot of interest around this Phalaenopsis gigantea. I can't say I was never worried about this one. I pretty much rolled the dice when purchasing it, and from what I can see, it's doing well. The bottom leaf is drying. It's an older leaf, so I'm not worried about it. I'm gonna wait until it's completely dry, and then it will easily pull off from the plant. The next step for this plant is for a new leaf to emerge and for it to start pushing out some new aerial roots. That will let me know that this plant is happy. I water this plant once a week. I put it in a bowl and allow it to soak for about 30 minutes. Also giving this plant a very weak fertilized solution every time she drinks. I'm trying out the Fox Farm Grow Big fertilizer. It's my first time using it, so I'm hoping this plant's going to be happy with it. Next up is the Bulbophyllum. This is Bulbophyllum cruentum by Bulbophyllum Phalaenopsis. Bulbophyllums like it moist, so I've been keeping this one moist. The roots are starting to attach itself to the orchid bark. This is great. Now I'm comfortable with top dressing it with some sphagnum moss. Wow, friends, look at that nice, beautiful new root. That's all new since I brought this plant home, so I'm quite happy to see that. Now that I know that the plant is thriving, I'm gonna add some sphagnum moss to the top. The sphagnum moss will retain some moisture and keep the roots nice and moist, just the way the plant likes it. The pseudobulbs are nice and plump. I've also checked around the side of the pot to see if there's any new roots emerging. I don't see any yet, so hopefully we'll see some soon. Plant friends, I would say this Tangerine Fire Mini Sun was an impulse purchase. When I picked it up, I didn't know that the blooms were so stunning. Plant friends, if you follow me on Instagram, you've seen a lot of pictures and videos about this bloom. What a stunning plant. And plant friends, guess what? It came in bud and all the buds bloom. Just fantastic. I'm so happy none blast. These mini Cattleyas have certainly piqued my interest. Now this beauty, I don't see any new roots, and because there's no new roots, the back bulbs seem to be suffering a little bit, so I'm crossing my fingers on this one. Although she gave a fantastic bloom, this is the orchid I'm actually most worried about because I don't see any new roots. At the Southern Ontario Orchid Show, I also picked up this vanilla plant. I purchased it from Crystal Star, and at first I was worried about this one. I wasn't sure how it's going to maintain the humidity and keep this plant happy, but I think she's happy. She shot out this new growth. What a wonderful beauty. I'm keeping this plant in my IKEA cabinet where it's getting a lot of humidity. There's two nodes on this plant. First node has a nice little vine. The second one has a little bit of something. I think I see a little bit of an eye, so I'm hoping to get a second vine growing soon. It's potted up in a nice chunky mixture, so it's well draining, but I've got the sphagnum moss on top to retain some humidity in the pot. It is a clay pot, so it does dry out very quickly. The liparis grossa was also an impulse purchase. This little beauty was $10, so I couldn't leave the show without taking it home. My research online says this plant likes it moist, so I've been keeping it moist, and it seems to be happy. It's pushed out a tiny little pseudobulb, so I'm thinking it's a success. All the pseudobulbs are nice and plump, and on the leaves there's no yellowing on the tips, so I'm quite happy about that. Since this plant likes it moist and humid, I've kept it in a plastic pot. There's a little bit of a chunky mixture in there, and of course some sphagnum moss on top to maintain some moisture. Plant friends, I'm so happy about this new growth. Next we've got the Oncidium Gold Dust. Now this little beauty, the flowers are just wonderful and very fragrant as well. The plant is looking now, but at first she pouted a little bit. She had a few yellowy leaves that since fell off. I'm hopeful for this one. It's stopped dropping leaves and it's stopped the yellowing, and the pseudobulbs are looking nice and healthy. Now what I've learned is that this plant likes to dry out completely in between watering. I appreciate having a plastic pot on this one. I can see how much humidity is in the pot. As well, I can see when it's pushing out new roots, and that's something that I'm really looking forward to. I want to see new roots and I want to see some new pseudobulbs. Next up is cornu-cervi flava. This one was a little bit iffy at the beginning. Plant friends, it didn't have a huge root system. But the two half roots that it had It's doing very well. It's soaking up a lot of water. I leave the roots a little bit exposed, so when I look at the pot, I can look at the roots to see if they're nice and green. If they're green, I know I don't need to water. If they're gray, then I will give it a little bit of a soak. I also feel the leaves to see if they're nice and firm. If they're limp, then it definitely needs water. Firm, I don't worry about it. Another positive sign for this plant is the new leaf. The newest leaf is actively growing, so I'm very confident that this plant will pull through and hopefully give me a flower on that flower spike. Plant friends, those are the plants that I purchased at the Southern Ontario Orchid Society show and sale. Now let's take a look at the beauties that I purchased at the Royal Botanical Gardens Orchid Show and Sale. At that show, I picked up another Bulbophyllum. This time it was the Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry, and that new growth is growing nicely. This is also one of those plants that like it nice and humid, and I haven't repotted it yet. I'm waiting for this new growth to be a little bit more established. Then I'm going to put it in a nice wide pot so the plant could grow, scramble and ramble across the top of the pot. These plants like to spread their wings. One of the things I like about this is that I can see the roots. They're nice and green and healthy. But once this baby's repot, I'm going to add some sphagnum moss to the top. Yes, you guessed it, to retain that moisture. This one was $30. I thought it wasn't bad for Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry, which is a popular plant. I thought that was a good price, and I like that there was that active growth tip, so I know the plant's nice and healthy. Plant friends, my little Pinguicula is doing well. I was so apprehensive about getting this because I've not had success with them in the past, but it's doing great. Thanks, Gabrielle, for suggesting that I should water this with distilled water. I think it's working. I think these Pinguiculas or butterworts are essential. When you've got plants that like humidity, these plants are a must. In case you get fungus gnats, these carnivorous plants could just munch on them. I also see something growing in the pot. I'm not sure if it's an additional plant, but we'll wait and see. I'm not going to pull that out just yet. Plant friends, you can see a few old fungus gnats on the leaves, and with having it zoomed in on the camera, you can really appreciate the beauty of the leaves. Next, we've got Sedirea japonica. This plant's doing well. I'm actually impressed with the way that it's growing, and I haven't decided what I'm gonna do about this potting situation. It's mounted and it's potted at the same time, but the plant is happy and the new leaf is actively growing. It's been about 4 weeks since I brought this baby home, and I haven't even removed the sticker yet. It is a cool growing orchid, so I'm trying to keep it in a cool spot in the IKEA cabinet on the bottom shelf in a dark corner. It's still getting bright indirect light, but much less light compared to my other plants. For water, I've been soaking this plant for about 15 minutes once a week, and it seems to be happy with that. The leaves are also nice and firm, so I know that this plant is getting enough water. Next, we've got Phal Dutch Lady, and this one I picked it up at the Royal Botanical Orchid Show and Sale. It was on their members table. This one's beautiful, nice mottled leaf. Now the lower leaf is fading a bit, which is normal for older leaves. When I purchased this plant, it was in full bloom, so I knew the blooms weren't going to stick around for a very long time. Now I'm hoping this plant is a warm grower, so I'm hoping for some blooms later on in the summer. Maybe it will extend the spike. The mud leaf on this plant is so beautiful. I also water this plant once a week, and for all the orchids, what I've been doing is feeding them with a very weak solution. I'm using the Fox Farm Grow Big, and they seem to be enjoying that. I'm always checking for new leaves. Sometime when an orchid's done with its bloom, that's when it will push out new leaves. So I'm hoping to see some new leaves on this one. With the older leaves dying back, I'm thinking a new leaf should emerge shortly. Based on her history, it's time for a repotting. I love how the grower was very organized with this plant. I know that it was very loved. When I repot, I'm hoping to maintain this meticulous record of repotting. Next, we've got the Pleurothallis bivalvis. Now this one I was quite nervous about. It's an unusual orchid. I've never had something like this in my collection before, but it's doing great. It's worked on a new growth since being in my care. I'm just ecstatic about this. From what I understand, this is a cool growing orchid. It doesn't like temperatures over 71 or 21. It likes it cool, but it also likes it humid. This plant is in a very airy media, so it does dry out very quickly. It's also in a clay pot, so I soak it in water every 3 days or so for about 15 minutes. Looks like the plant is wedged in the pot by a couple of styrofoam pieces. I'm hoping this new little growth is going to give me some blooms. When I purchased the orchid, it already had 2 blooms on it, and the blooms are quite interesting, very showy. It's hard to believe this is an orchid. Plant friends, these are the orchids that I picked up at the Southern Ontario Orchid Show and the Royal Botanical Orchid Show. It was nice going to orchid shows back to back and quite fun, and I'm glad shows are back on. Now let's have a look at my IKEA cabinet. The bottom shelf is kept cool and humid with a cool mist diffuser. The Millswell cabinet is actually nice and roomy. The shelves are nice and deep and wide, so you can get a lot of plants in here. Plant friends, I almost forgot about this orchid. This is one that I also picked up at the orchid show. It's a Phalaenopsis tetraspis crossed with micholitzII. When I purchased this one, it was already in flower, and the flower is spectacular. It was already potted up for me, so I didn't do a repotting on this one. It looks like chunky orchid bark, some charcoal, and sphagnum moss. The roots that I see in the pot look fairly healthy, but I'm always squeezing the leaves to see if they're nice and firm. If they're firm, I know that the plant's happy and I don't have to worry about watering. My Phalaenopsis Chine Fly Eagle is also enjoying the cabinet. Now that's not a fussy orchid at all. It's constantly in bloom. Every 3 months or so, it's always doing something. In the cabinet, I also have a few Hoyas tucked in here and there, and my Sedirea is actually enjoying the cabinet. The leaves have gotten a lot firmer, and it's pushed out a new leaf, so I'm quite happy about that. Since this is a greenhouse, heat rises, so the top shelf is where I keep my warm growing plants, like my Phalaenopsis bellina. This is a new bellina in my collection. I recently added it. It's the Joy Thai hybrid. I also have a little succulent in the back. The Senecio is nice and happy. My Violacea indigo is working on a new bloom, so I'm hoping to have pictures of that soon. I also have a little tiny mini mark in the back hiding out. I'm hoping to get blooms on that sometime in the future. When it gets warm and sunny, that's when I like to turn on the diffuser to have the clouds roll in to create that cloud forest for my cool, humidity-loving orchids. So far the plants are enjoying it, and it's a cool little setup. We'll see how this fares in the summer. Plant friends, for the top 2 shelves, I decided to add some fans. These 2 shelves are a little bit warmer, so I decided to add some fan to create that air movement. Also decided to add some grow lights, which will be great for the winter when we don't get a lot of sunlight. In the spring and summer, I don't think the grow lights needed. This cabinet is in a south facing window, so it's getting a lot of light. In the south facing windows, the plants closest to the window will get a couple of hours of direct sunlight. So I try to put all my sun loving plants closer to the window. Thanks for watching, plant friends. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and follow me on Instagram at Life of Bellina.